Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents You've Got an Earl by Bianca Blythe, narrated by Evelyn Rose. Prologue. Mrs. Feldman's School for Remarkable Young Ladies. Rain pattered with a ferocity it never did in Hampshire, slamming against the columns of the finishing school as if determined to cover each and every flower. The large window panes became foggy, and Sabrina brushed away the soft condensation drops with her handkerchief. In Hampshire, Sabrina had never watched the rain, but that had been before. Before Papa had died, and before Mamma had disappeared. Before her brother, Timothy, had taken Sabrina to the finishing school, even though everyone knew she was still a year too young to join. Priscilla Patmore, the most praised girl in the school, certainly knew. In the old days, Sabrina might have read a book or played in the large treehouse that Timothy had abandoned when he'd gone to Eton. All the books here were boring, though, and the treehouse was hours and hours away. Sabrina pressed her nose against the window, trying to see. The sky was grey, and water toppled from the sky. Even the trees and flowers looked grey and dull. If only it was still before. Sabrina's heart tensed, and she clutched her arms together. "Are you crying?" An alto voice Sabrina recognized interrupted her thoughts, and her stomach toppled with a sudden force rivaled only by the incessant rain. She turned toward the sound. Priscilla stood before her. I wasn't crying," Sabrina stammered. Priscilla strode toward her. "I think you were crying." I wasn't." Perhaps Sabrina hadn't been crying, but now her voice sounded high-pitched, as if her normal octave had decided to flee from Priscilla's presence. She didn't blame it. An odd, prickling sensation swarmed over her eyes, and the air became hot and uncomfortable. "Crying is for babies," Priscilla said. "I'm not a baby." Sabrina jutted out her chin, but from the manner in which Priscilla's lips curled, the older girl was not convinced. But then, even Eloisa and Leonora had argued when Timothy had announced that Sabrina was going to join the finishing school. The headmistress had been surprised and had spoken with Timothy in a very loud voice in her office when Sabrina had arrived. Sabrina thought she'd only been permitted to stay because she would sleep in the same room as Eloisa. "I don't know why you bother to be here." Priscilla crossed her arms in an elegant motion, and her perfectly coiled blonde hair bounced only gently. "You're never going to be a lady." Sabrina tightened her fists. "That's not true. Say it's not true." "Babies can't be ladies." Priscilla's rosebud lips drew together into another smirk, and her pale blue eyes gleamed. "Besides, you have red hair. Everyone knows red hair is the very worst kind of hair." "That's not true." "It is." Priscilla gave a smug smile. "Red hair looks ridiculous. It clashes with every dress. Red belongs in the fireplace, not on heads." Sabrina had never known blue eyes could look so cold. Eloisa had blue eyes, but they didn't make Sabrina want to shrink back. Sabrina's vision suddenly became blurry, and she rushed from the room. Priscilla wasn't going to see her cry. Never, never, never. She pattered down the corridor, pretending she didn't hear soft laughter behind her. She stumbled over the large stone tiles, then yanked open the door to the grand drawing room that family members visited in. This room was only for guests, but this was an emergency. The room was darker than the corridor. The thick damask curtains looked pretty, but the heavy brocade velvet didn't let in much light on even the best of days. This was decidedly not the best of days. Few days in Staffordshire seemed to be. Sabrina tiptoed in the room. She didn't want anyone to find her. The rain continued thundering on the manor house. Light flickered from a corner, and Sabrina's stomach fell. Someone was already in here. She looked toward the door. Would Priscilla be waiting at the other side, still smirking? Sabrina turned slowly to the light. Eloisa was far too good to be in this room, but Leonora was sometimes naughty. Sabrina stared at a large red armchair. An arm rested on one side, and Sabrina shrank back. That arm belonged to a man. It was large and encased in a tailcoat. Sabrina knew because she'd sewn tailcoats for Timothy. She liked making clothes. It was one of her favourite things to do, even if Priscilla said Sabrina would be better suited to being a lady's maid than an actual lady. Ladies were supposed to embroider elaborate patterns between tambour frames before discarding them in favour of new, equally complex arrangements of flowers and plants. They weren't supposed to actually make clothes. Practicality was reserved for other people, no matter how beautiful attire might be. Sabrina stepped back, colliding with a candlestick. It toppled to the floor with a bang, and the candle rolled over the floor as if it had always desired to explore the room. Sabrina picked up the candlestick hastily, grasping the gold exterior in her hand. The candle was rolling straight to the armchair, and Sabrina's mouth dried. In the next moment, the person rose from the armchair. Was it a new teacher? All the teachers were women, but perhaps the headmistress had made an exception. Was it a parent? Please let it be a nice parent. Sabrina prepared for some hoary-haired man who'd spent the day pummeling the headmistress with questions on just how ladylike the finishing school would make his daughter. Instead, someone with blonde hair picked up the candle and turned toward her. This man was not old. He was older than Sabrina, of course, but then everyone was older than Sabrina. This man had bright blue eyes that seemed kind and reminded Sabrina of the ocean on pretty days. He clasped the white candle in his gloved fingers and stared at her. Sabrina had never seen a man quite so handsome. His skin was sun-kissed, as if he enjoyed spending time outside. Probably he wasn't from Staffordshire. He held up the candle. "I think you dropped this." She nodded. He gave a bright smile and strode toward her, oblivious to Sabrina's heart rate quickening to a pace better suited for running than standing. You're not a student," Sabrina stammered. The man's eyes sparkled. "That's true." He took the candlestick from her, and warmth moved through her as his long fingers touched hers. She had the horrible sense she must be blushing, given the heat that had settled onto her cheeks. But he simply inserted the candle into the candlestick. "There. Now, where did it go?" She gestured to the sideboard. He placed the candlestick onto the sideboard, then beamed. "I'm Percival." "I'm Sabrina. Why are you here?" Too late, she realized her words might be considered to be rude, but Percival didn't seem to mind. "My friend has a sister here." She nodded dumbly. "We're on our way back from Cambridge, and we wanted to stop to see her." "Cambridge?" she breathed, and he grinned and nodded. "Indeed. I take it you've heard of it before?" She nodded hastily. Only the best men went to Cambridge. Timothy had explained it to her. Timothy, of course, was also at Cambridge. Percival tilted his head, and his golden locks fell across his brow in a pleasing manner. "You haven't received any distressing news?" Sabrina shook her head. "Why?" "You seemed upset," Percival said. "Oh." Sabrina bit her lip. "I suppose I am." "Why?" Percival's eyes were wide with concern. "I'm new," Sabrina explained. "That is always an imperfect state." Sabrina nodded. Percival understood. She had a strange sensation Percival would understand everything. And... She hesitated and scrunched her lips together. "And?" Percival asked, his deep voice warm and comforting, like a woolen pelisse. "It's silly," Sabrina said, fluttering her eyelashes down. "It's not silly if it matters to you." "My hair is red," Sabrina admitted. "And it's the wrong colour. Everything about me is wrong. I even have the wrong interests." Her age, certainly, was wrong. "I think red is a beautiful colour," Percival said solemnly. "And what interests could possibly be wrong?" "I like creating clothes," Sabrina said. He smiled. "That seems like a very clever preoccupation. If you enjoy it, you should continue." The door opened, and a man who must be Percival's age strode into the room. At his side was Priscilla, and Sabrina's heart tumbled.
"Percival!" the man beamed. "I found her. This is my sister, Priscilla."
Oh no. Sabrina's stomach tumbled down. Priscilla gave Percival a wide smile and moved toward him regally. Sabrina could tell Priscilla had spent some time at the finishing school. No doubt Priscilla never had books fall from her head when she practiced gliding. The headmistress seemed to think every woman should be prepared for the possibility of marrying some foreign prince who would insist she wear a tiara, and would be unamiable were she to drop it on some marble floor for it to shatter. "Lord Plymouth," Priscilla curtsied, and Sabrina's heart galloped. The man was a lord. Priscilla turned toward her. "I see you've met the Earl." Percival was an earl. Sabrina stepped back, and Priscilla smirked, but she didn't think Percival could see. "You shouldn't be here," Priscilla reminded her. Sabrina hurried from the room before remembering she hadn't said a proper goodbye to Percival. Priscilla was right, though. Sabrina wasn't supposed to be here. Sabrina continued down the hallway, thankful her footsteps were muffled by the sound of the rain. Her heart swelled as she thought about the solemn blonde Earl. Chapter 1. 3 years later. No sound equalled that of silence, a fact that became clear whenever Percival, Earl of Plymouth, heard its opposite. The loud slamming of the front door and rapid movements through the corridor made it clear he was currently experiencing the latter phenomenon. Only one person made that sound: Aunt Horatia. Perhaps Percival's parents were dead, and perhaps Aunt Horatia was his only aunt. But she certainly seemed determined to make up for that in sheer vocal volume, as if eager for the casual observer to think he had a whole fleet of aunts visiting at any one time. Percival raised his head from his ledger as his aunt barreled into his library. Her coquelicot afternoon dress immediately surpassed in vibrancy even the burgundy and green leather-bound books in the room. Her hair was arranged in its customary unkempt manner, a fact he assumed had to do more with her propensity to speed down the pavements of London rather than any lack of care by her lady's maid. Aunt Horatia placed her hands on her waist and glared. "You didn't tell me you were going to be in London." "I'm always here for Parliament," Percival replied dryly. "Humph." Aunt Horatia's brow crinkled, a fact made more obvious by its large size, but her green eyes sparkled. Percival had the distinct impression she wasn't terribly upset after all. "There is something important to discuss," Aunt Horatia said. Percival braced for Aunt Horatia to venture into discussions of Percival's property. Father had died suddenly when Percival was little, and Aunt Horatia had overseen much of what Father's estate manager had worked on, finally using what she knew as a result of her early love for mathematics. Percival had been managing Barchester Park for some time now. The estate ran smoothly, something not always present for everyone in the ton, given the forlorn faces of society's creme de la creme and the abundance of strong brandy proffered when they read the finance sections of the broadsheets in his favourite gentleman's club. "Please, have a seat," Percival said. Aunt Horatia wrinkled her nose and waved an arm dismissively. "So that you can serve me tea and chat about innocuous matters. No, you require a wife." Percival blinked, and dread filled him. Ever since that terrible day, marriage was an impossibility. Aunt Horatia had spoken to him about the importance of it before, but he'd never seen her this energized about the topic.
"Is that what you wanted to discuss with me?"
His voice wobbled.
"Naturally. You must marry now."
After making the pronouncement, Aunt Horatia crossed her arms and glared. She also tapped her foot. Percival cringed. Bad things happened when Aunt Horatia tapped her foot. Unfortunately, she was not in her home. She was in London, and there was only so much time she could spend rounding the Serpentine before she focused on Percival's unmarried state.
"We should have a house party."
Aunt Horatia strode about the room. Her skirt swished against the gilt furniture legs, and her Parisian shoes pounded against the polished floorboards. Percival's heart squeezed, as if his aunt had accidentally trod upon it.
"This house is large enough for a ball. Nash himself redecorated the ballroom."
"We need people to stay overnight," Aunt Horatia announced.
"Why?"
Aunt Horatia's eyebrows scurried up, and she pursed her lips and gave him a look that suggested he was dim. No one ever gave him that look. Even his tutors at Eton, whom everyone else feared, had only ever praised him on his skills at Latin noun declension and his ease at fraction dividing. There was no section of the body he could not name. Indeed, he could not only name each constellation in the sky, but also share the myth associated with it. Most people deemed him intelligent. Aunt Horatia was not most people.
"Honestly,"
Aunt Horatia said,
"I do wonder what they taught you at school. Eton is hardly inexpensive. One would think we were paying solely for your top hat. To think you're responsible for creating bills in Parliament." "I have no problem forming bills," he said sternly. "In fact, there's a very important one I'm working on now."
Aunt Horatia rolled her eyes.
"You say that every season."
"Because it's true every season," Percival insisted.
"You need to find a wife,"
Aunt Horatia said.
"And the best way to do that has always been a house party. I don't care what anyone says about balls. You're going to know a woman better if you spend a weekend with her rather than a few hours. I care greatly about your future happiness."
"Personally, I think a weekend can't possibly be sufficient time."
Aunt Horatia's eyes glittered. "Then we'll have a lengthy house party."
"No," Percival said. "That's not what I meant."
Aunt Horatia laughed. "Are you certain?"
Percival hesitated. He hadn't met any young lady he wished to marry, but Aunt Horatia was only going to listen if he had. Perhaps he could simply tell her he had met someone. That would stop her matchmaking efforts and the incessant statements about the necessity of procuring an heir. Percival might never lie, but perhaps this was an occasion for it. He pushed away the thought. Percival never lied. Still, the thought was tempting. It would be nice if Aunt Horatia would stop matchmaking him. He thrust out his chin.
"Perhaps I have already met someone."
Aunt Horatia raised her eyebrows.
"Percival Andrew Augustus, are you lying to me?"
"No, of course not. I wouldn't possibly. I've known her for some time." Percival's throat constricted, and the back of his neck warmed as if he'd accidentally stepped into the candelabra's flames. Aunt Horatia's gaze remained firm.
You mustn't prevaricate. When have I ever prevaricated?
Aunt Horatia's eyes widened, and a wide smile spread over her round face.
My sweetheart, my angel, I'm so happy.
Aunt Horatia swept him into a tight hug.
A ball will suffice.
A ball? Percival asked faintly.
I must meet her,
Aunt Horatia said, releasing him from her embrace.
I am your only remaining relative. I assume, just because I am female, you will not overlook my seniority and years of wisdom.
Of course not. He just needed to present Aunt Horatia with a match. Percival rose abruptly.
I need to leave.
Aunt Horatia raised her eyebrows.
You're not going to ring for tea?
No. Aunt Horatia shook her head.
If you were married, your wife would know to ring for tea when a guest appeared.
Percival sat back down abruptly.
Would you care for tea, Aunt Horatia?
She shook her head.
I want a ball. Thankfully, I've already arranged one.
Percival widened his eyes. Aunt Horatia opened the gold clasp of her reticule, embroidered with poppies that matched her dress, then removed a letter.
The ball is this Friday. Make certain you're here. In this house.
Percival shifted his legs.
This is the residence of the Earl of Plymouth, is it not?
Aunt Horatia's eyes shimmered. Most aunts might not surprise one with balls, but then Aunt Horatia had practically raised him since his parents' untimely deaths.
Do the servants know? I'm going to inform them.
Aunt Horatia flashed a wide smile.
Very well,
Percival murmured. There was no point in stopping a ball if invitations had already been sent out. Percival made his excuses and hurried from the house. He hastened over the pavement, noting the surprised looks of various passers-by on their afternoon walks. Percival forced himself to slow his pace, and he was relieved when he finally arrived in front of his friend Sebastian's imposing house. The butler showed Percival to the library. Sebastian peered at him from his stacks of books.
You look terrible,
Sebastian observed wryly.
I feel terrible.
Percival plopped onto a poof imported from some faraway place where he wished he were currently. Aunt Horatia wants me to marry.
That's hardly news.
I told her I was already courting someone. Sebastian raised an eyebrow.
So she wouldn't matchmake me,
Percival said quickly. Damnation. The idea had made perfect sense in his head.
And now she wants to meet the woman in question.
Sebastian sighed.
It's not that dreadful. Plenty of women would be happy to be escorted by you. You can even ask Priscilla Patmore.
You don't understand, Percival said faintly.
They'll think I want to marry them.
Oh, I see. Sebastian was silent, and Percival's heart tumbled toward the cold marble floor of Sebastian's study. Sebastian was never silent. He'd talked easily at Eton, whether he knew the correct answer or not, much to the irritation of their tutors. But now he remained quiet, as if some sudden illness had befallen his vocal cords.
Sebastian?
Percival asked tentatively.
I'm thinking.
Sebastian scrunched his forehead together. Finally, his eyes rounded, and he snapped his fingers.
I've got it. What you need,
Sebastian said triumphantly,
is a fake fiancé.
Percival raised an eyebrow.
I'm not familiar with that occupation. That's because it's a much unused one.
Sebastian scrambled to his feet and began to pace the room. His heels clicked on the floor as he marched with the enthusiasm of a Cambridge lecturer contemplating the more interesting parts of his research.
Though that doesn't make it unimportant.
Percival raised an eyebrow carefully at his friend.
Is that so?
Sebastian nodded firmly, with the certainty of a mathematician who'd just been asked if 2 + 2 was 4.
If women believe you to be already betrothed, you won't have to worry about matchmaking mammas and proud papas swarming about you at balls. Simpering debutantes were more my worry, Percival said.
Sebastian flourished a hand dismissively.
Of course, though some of those matchmaking mammas can be brutal. All that time spent strolling Hyde Park wearing heavy clothes makes them surprisingly strong. Or not surprisingly, as the fact might be. At any rate, it's good if you stay away from them. So you suggest I hire someone for this role?
Percival shifted his legs uncomfortably. He wasn't even familiar with current gossip. He certainly didn't know how to go about hiring someone.
London is filled with actresses. You'll have no problem generating interest. There are only so many theatres in the city. Tell you what, I'll find you someone.
That's truly not necessary. Sebastian raised his eyebrows.
And have your aunt think you a liar? Utter nonsense.
I would deserve it, Percival said miserably.
And you would never do anything naughty again.
Sebastian shook his head solemnly.
I won't take that chance.
Percival blinked. Sebastian gave him a bright smile.
Fortunately, I don't find the prospect of hiring somebody to play your intended too trying.
Percival raised an eyebrow.
Indeed, I'm quite happy to take on that task.
Sebastian's lips curled. Percival rolled his eyes. Sebastian often topped lists of rogues to avoid, and Percival was not surprised the Duke was acquainted with actresses.
How self-sacrificing of you. Indeed.
Sebastian's eyes glimmered in a most infuriating manner, and he exuded smugness. Sebastian seemed to think it a compliment when mothers told their daughters to be wary of him, even though Sebastian wouldn't do anything worse than not court them. Women found it easy to fall in love with him, and he found it easy to break their hearts.
I'll tell you what, Sebastian said. I'll send a woman to your library before the ball. That way you'll know it's her.
Percival nodded slowly.
Very well.
He scrunched his forehead together.
If she's too perfect, Aunt Horatia will probably give her the family ring herself. She's, quite eager for me to marry. Something about children pitter-pattering through the hallways. Apparently my footsteps no longer bring instant joy to her heart. I can pair you with someone your aunt will despise, someone utterly inappropriate who will ensure your aunt ceases her marital dreams at once, lest she find herself with an unwelcome new relative. You needn't worry. You're an excellent friend.
Sebastian offered a smug smile.
I know. Now, what do you say? Find me a faux beloved.
Chapter 2. Violinists played, dancers pounded across the black and white marble floor, and Sabrina's heart galloped. This was Lord Plymouth's townhouse. This was where he lived, at least when Parliament was in session. Silver vases filled with lilacs and reflected by large mirrors dotted the room. Normally, vases didn't cause her heart to expand, but tonight was clearly an exception. Had the Earl marvelled at the beauty too? Had he expressed a preference for lilacs? Had he instructed the musicians to play these songs? Even though she couldn't precisely see the Earl in the ballroom, she felt near him. Her brother, Timothy, and his wife, Constance, strode beside her, but she knew the sparkle in their eyes had more to do with being invited to this ball than any particular excitement at seeing the Earl. Sabrina and her two sisters, Eloisa and Leonora, had been temporarily frozen from society when their mother had modelled for some nude paintings for the famous painter Julius. Fortunately, Eloisa was now betrothed to a viscount, but even though invitations now trickled in, people still viewed them dubiously. Other debutantes chatted near the fireplace. Some men accompanied them to the dance floor.
"Now, girls,"
Timothy said, even though he was still only 24 and shouldn't adopt such a paternal tone.
I know things will be difficult because you don't know many...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?